Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar organized by the European Goose Management Platform under AEWA. We have a theme today centered around geese and the risk to air safety. And we are planning to have this meeting running from now at 1 until 4 o'clock this afternoon. And we have a program that we have put together for you, which contains a series of presentations and finishing with a general discussion. And I hope that you will all be able to participate actively in the discussions towards the end of the webinar. First, I will give a presentation on behalf of the European Goose Management Platform. I represent the data center of the platform. Next, we'll have a series of presentations by authorities and airport representatives from 3 different settings in Europe, where we have different issues with geese related to airport safety, air safety. And these represent the situation in the Netherlands, which is sort of the longest, most developed case that we have, which I think we can learn a lot from. And we have a presentation from Copenhagen Airport with escalating issues with geese. And then finally, we have a presentation from Norway, where there has been an increase in problems with geese in a couple of airports, and we'll have a presentation specifically from Trondheim Airport. Each of the presenters have been given half an hour for their presentation, and we hope that you'll try to keep that to 25 minutes so that we can have 5 minutes of questions for clarification. Then we'll have a break so that you can go and have a coffee or stretch your legs or whatever at 2:15, finishing off with the last 2 presentations, and then have 35 minutes of discussion. So this is where I hope that you will be able to participate actively in the webinar. And I'm very happy to and honored that we have these presenters today. Thank you very much for participating. And also thanks to the EGMP Secretariat, Chennai in particular, who is in the background helping us, guiding us through the technical issues that may occur. Just a few practical notes before we start. The presentations will be recorded, and that also includes the clarifying questions and the discussion in the end. If you want to take the floor in the discussion or for questions, please use the chat and write your name, affiliation, and then we'll come back to you. We'll ask you to take the floor, and please then present your question or your comment so that it can be recorded for the meeting. You'll find all the presentations afterwards and all the recording on the website of the EGMP. Purpose of the seminar is to shed light on the issues faced in these 3 selected airports in the EGMP range, where geese are causing increasing risks. And we have airport representatives and authorities to inform us about their problems, handling of risk, challenges, and the national policies. We hope that we can support the sharing of experience between airport stakeholders and the wider EGMP. And we also hope that this can actually stimulate further connection between the EGMP airports, authorities, and other stakeholders in finding effective measures to reduce risks of collision, specifically targeted geese. And to those of you who are not really sort of familiar with the EGMP, this is a platform under the African Eurasian Waterbird Agreement. It has sort of been established since 2016, and it's primarily sort of European in scope, provides a mechanism for a structured, coordinated, inclusive decision-making implementation process for the sustainable use and management of geese in Europe. And the objective is that we need to maintain the populations at favorable conservation status while taking into account concerns of relevant stakeholders, pertinent legislative frameworks and regulations. To operate this platform, we have an international working group, which is mainly sort of national governmental representatives, international NGOs, and experts. Underneath that, we have various task forces, species, population-specific or cross-cutting task forces like the Agricultural Task Force. We have the Secretariat, which is based in Bonn at the AEWA Secretariat, and we have the Data Centre based at Aarhus University, sort of supporting the process with the monitoring protocols and the assessment of the progress of the plans. Underneath that, we also have an international modeling consortium that plays an active role in developing some of the models that we use, some of the techniques that we use to monitor or to assess the situation of the geese. So this is a platform that has now 16 European countries, including the European Commission, as participants, and we are still expanding the membership of the EGMP. The backbone of the EGMP is sort of the International Single Species Management and Action Plans. It all started off with a plan for pink-footed geese in 2013, when it was implemented. 2016 followed the International Species Action Plan for tiger bean geese, and then 2018, the plans for Barnacle geese and Greylag geese were implemented. So in total, 4 species of geese and several populations underneath some of these. And particularly in the Barnacle goose and Greylag goose management plans that were implemented in 2018, air safety is raised as a major concern, and minimizing the risk to air safety is a key objective in these plans. And these objectives are formulated this way. It's given as a fundamental objective in the plans that the EGMP should attempt to minimize the risk to air safety, recognizing that these risks are either localized, not necessarily sort of an international issue, or they may not be well understood. So with all the uncertainty about this issue, we were obviously seeing the need for addressing air safety. And 2 sort of means objectives were identified to support that. 1, geese are kept away from sensitive areas by using various means such as deterring geese, diverting geese, for instance, through habitat management, or avoiding that geese are occupying areas locally in areas determined by the national authorities as being sensitive to the presence of geese. And secondly, if necessary, derogations can be granted to address the prevention of risk by management at the appropriate scale. And particularly for Barnacle geese, it should be mentioned that this is a protected species throughout the EU. There's no open hunting season, but derogation can be granted to kill individuals where they cause damage or risk to human socio-economic interests. And that can be at local scale, it can be at a wider scale as well, but given under certain conditions that this should actually be sort of the last resort, and that all other measures have not been successfully or sufficient to address the issue. In the case of Greylag geese, which is a huntable species, it's more sort of likely that you can actually start doing a management of local or national or even international populations by population control, even though that this should also be sort of taken through a really serious consideration before applied. And in 2020, we did an exercise for Greylag geese looking into what are actually valued as the most important objectives by the International Working Group of the EGMP. And it turned out by that exercise that bird strikes are actually high on the agenda at a level similar to preventing crop damage and to minimizing deleterious impacts to habitats. So this identifies that we have to take the values regarding the prevention of bird strikes as a very serious issue. And we also made a questionnaire to look into sort of the issue in selected European airports. And we looked at 14 commercial airports from which we got replies in 2020. Unfortunately, that was during the Corona pandemic, and not all airports were sort of able to reply. But nevertheless, we got the reply from. Sorry? Okay. This identified that Greylag geese and Barnacle geese were the goose species most frequently reported to have been involved in bird strikes. Particularly in Copenhagen airport, the growth in goose numbers was accompanied by an increase in frequency of strikes with geese. We also saw that airports use various methods to monitor, manage, control geese at the airport premises, mostly inside airports, but in some cases also outside the airport. But there was no universal solution to deter geese at present. 10 out of 14 airports have seen an increase in goose abundance and all numbers of geese crossing the airports over the past 5 years. In some cases, the growth in goose populations have been accompanied by corresponding increase in the need for management actions. But in recent years, resources allocated to the management and control of goose populations have remained stable at most airports. That could possibly also be an effect of the pandemic. Many airports expect an increasing problems associated with the presence of geese in the future. Again, a hint to the fact that this is something that needs to be taken seriously in the planning process. Just a few words about the two populations that were sort of mentioned as the most problematic. Greylag geese, where we operate with a management plan for the northwest, so southwest European population, breeding on the mainland in Europe, migrating to winter in the North Sea region and as far south as Spain. This population has been increasing dramatically since the 1980s and seems to have been stabilizing around the level of 800,000 or something like that in more recent years. And that's also sort of demonstrated by the midwinter counts that is produced in most of the range states of the Greylag geese, but also by the breeding bird censuses that has been carried out for many years in some of the range states. The other population is the Barnacle goose that breeds traditionally in North Russia, but more recently also in the Baltic region and in the North Sea region. These geese are wintering in the southern Baltic and in the North Sea region primarily. And it is a population that has also been dramatically increasing since the 1980s and even before that. In this population, we also see a tendency now for a stabilization at around a level of 1.4, 1.5 million individuals, mainly wintering in the Netherlands, Germany, and in more recent years also in Denmark and Sweden. What we also see as a tendency is that geese have started not only to breed in Arctic species have started to breed in temperate regions, but geese have also become more urban in their breeding behavior. Thereby, they have come much closer to airports and they constitute a year-round issue. And they also tend to sort of be less shy than the wild populations of geese, thereby habituating more easily to human activities and also to airport activities. We also see a change in migratory behavior in several of the populations. geese stage and winter further north. This is definitely the case when we talk about Greylag geese in Norway, for instance, but also with the expansion of spring staging of Barnacle geese into the Baltic region in southern Finland in particular in recent years. And Barnacle geese have also expanded their migration route further north, particularly in the autumn. And I will pick this example from Falsterbo, which is a southern western spit in Sweden, where there's been regular observations carried out for several decades. And in the past, it was sort of sensational to see Barnacle geese, but as you can see, since 2010, in particular, there's been an exponential growth in numbers counted in the autumn, so that they nowadays count up to 500,000 Barnacle geese passing over Øresund, which is connected directly to Copenhagen Airport. So this is a very dynamic situation. We see problems continuing to increase, despite that we now see some tendencies for stabilization in numbers due to the change in behavior and migratory patterns. With these words, I would hurry on to pass on the word to the next presenter, who would be Albert de Hoon, Civil Aviation Authority in the Netherlands. Apologies for delaying the process. Over to you, Albert.
Yeah, thank you, Jesper. I will try to share my screen. Yes, thank you for the invitation. A couple of years ago, I was also invited to give a short presentation at the WAC, I think, the working group for Geese. Then I was surprised with the term air safety. We always call it flight safety in the aviation. So if I say flight safety, it's your air safety for the vocabulary. So my presentation is Geese and flight safety, and then from a governmental perspective. Well, let's get started. I'm Albert de Hoon, actually. Many know me, and I saw many familiar faces, over 100 participants. For those I have not seen yet, Happy New Year and all the best for 2023. I hope to see you soon again somewhere. The Netherlands, well, you all know it's flat, it's a swamp-like, so it's ideal for geese. All the ditches, all the green grasses, and where our cows are eating the grass in summer, the geese were used to eat it only in winter. But like around 2 million geese from the Arctic spending winter in the Netherlands. But like in the many years of recent years, recent decades, many geese decided to stay year-round as well. We have now up to 60,000 geese staying 12 months. So our problem with geese is not only a winter problem anymore, but during summer as well. What is the problem? As many airports, well, with all airports and all the birds and wildlife, when there is a movement over the runway or over the airport for the geese from sleeping areas to feeding areas, they may interfere with the flight paths of the aircraft. There are multiple pictures, you can see them on the internet as well, but I just took a few. And everybody can realize, hey, geese are heavy stuff, 4 or 5 kilos. Aircraft are certified to withstand like 3.6 kilograms, so even one goose is heavier than the engine, for example, should be able to handle. While geese are flying in flocks, if you hit one geese, many times you hit multiple geese, so the problem gets bigger. The 6th of June in 2010 we had a bird strike at Schiphol Airport. A Boeing 737 was striking 9 Canadian geese, so multiplied with 5 kilograms. It was a bird strike with 45 kilograms, which is much more than the design criteria. So that was a big problem. And the Dutch Safety Board, they investigated it, the emergency landing. So they had a really thorough study how this problem occurred and what the solution should be. The main problem was, well, after the strike, one of the 2 engines lost power, so they had to fly on 1 engine. That is still possible because that's why aircraft have 2 engines. If you see on the left, the situation of Amsterdam, multiple runways. And at this runway, the bird strike had occurred. And then the crew decided after takeoff to make a go around, so to land back. But while flying around Schiphol, they were just missing the telecom tower of the city of Haarlem. Here is the city of Amsterdam. So they were just missing this, luckily, because they didn't know it was there. They flew low over Haarlem, so many people were like, what's happening here? Then they had to make a detour over the harbor, and then finally they could go back on the runway. And of course, immediately everybody was thinking about the Hudson ditch, which occurred a year before this one, where Captain Sonnenberger put his plane on the Hudson River in downtown New York. And that one was also with Canadian geese, but both engines lost power. So the pilot couldn't do anything more. He could not go up or go to another airport. The only thing he could do was landing on the river. So this was actually our miracle on the Hudson, miracle in Amsterdam. But the Transport Safety Board, they analyzed, look, who are actually all the stakeholders? Whose problem is this? Who should find a solution? If you see here, all the parties, organizations, etc., who are involved in this topic, it's like a plate of spaghetti. In the middle is the Bird Strike Committee of the Netherlands, and we have links to all the parties. As you know from Holland, we are partly below sea level. So if one of our windmills, or well, water mills to take the water out, is not functioning, we will all be underwater. So we have to cooperate. How are we cooperating? We got an agreement with 10 parties, and they each have a different wall. So the Dutch Pilots Association, they keep stressing the importance of safety. They already did a long time before this strike with the Canada geese, but now everybody realized, hey, we really have a problem. Schiphol Airport, they have a zero tolerance for geese at the airport. They provide all the data and trials with bird radar. The next presenters will say something about Schiphol itself. We also had to liaise with the nature organizations who try to protect the nature. They had to allow, well, to agree a culling policy, even within the nature areas. The farmers got involved. Could they change their farming policies? The municipality, the provinces, spatial planning, for the province to give license to kill, actually, because in the Netherlands it's not the state itself, but the provinces who do it. The state of the Netherlands, they got the task to coordinate all this. The besides the nature organizations with who have the land, we also got BirdLife Netherlands involved for advice, and also to give some kind of permission for the culling policy. KLM, all the other airlines, of course, providing data, and also we are involved with ATC to see if it is possible to implement radar information and to change flight schedules. So after the report, we came up with a 4-track approach. First one, would it be possible to make the area around Schiphol and at Schiphol itself, of course, more unattractive for geese? Could we mitigate the resting, breeding, or foraging areas? Would it be possible to detect the geese in advance and then to change the flight schedule? And what are the possibilities to reduce the population of geese? So I will each for Rosanne explain a bit more. So what could the farmers do to grow crops that are unattractive? Because if you look at the population dynamics, every airport tries to lower the number of hazardous birds by harassing them to make them actually emigrating outside the airport, or to kill them by mortality. So the population number goes down, but nature was always looking for balance. So there will be more reproduction and others will come from elsewhere, making the population go up again. The population will only stabilize when the carrying capacity is reached. And it depends for each airport or each part of the world actually what the carrying capacity is. And as I showed in the first slides, the Netherlands has a very high carrying capacity for the geese. Perfect habitat, perfect climate. So yes, now we have 2 million. We do not know actually what the carrying capacity is, how far will it go. So to decrease the risk for flight safety, for air safety, we need to lower the carrying capacity. That could be done to reduce the amount of food, or to take away suitable breeding and resting areas. Now, the Schiphol is the area used to be a lake where ships were sinking, a hole of ships. It's literally. So in 1844, it was reclaimed from the sea. So it was very fertile clay land. And the first farmers were growing there wheat and barley. So the brown spots are wheat, the greens are barley, and the other ones are sugar beets and potatoes. And they do that in a rotation every 3-4 years. Here on the left, it's a bit small, but this is 2,500 hectares of wheat and barley over the years of 2015-2021. So around 2,000 hectares of this area is cultivated by wheat and barley. And here you can see the runways of Schiphol Airport. So it's actually covered within the food for the geese. Because while geese normally eat grass, they really like, well, the McDonald's type of food for them, the grains of the wheats and the barley. The yields are very high on the clay soil, up to 9,000 kilograms per hectare. But while harvesting, there are some harvest losses. We did some research, and we found like 25 kilograms per hectare of pure wheat is lost. So, and it's profitable for the geese to go there and to look for it. And just after harvesting, we can see big flocks of geese going to the grain to the fields. Not only geese, but here like a wood pigeon is full of the grains. So the question was, could the farmers grow other crops that are not attractive for the geese? Well, they are entrepreneurs, they have to run a business, and they have always been growing crops that are suited for the soil and climate and are most profitable, which for this area is wheat, barley, sugar beets, and potatoes. So 40% of Schiphol area is farmland. It's a big economical value of 100 million euros. The farmers they say, well, we have been here longer than the aircraft. We were there from 1844, while KLM started like 1910, 1920, the first flights. So very productive soil, as I said. And then we came to the solution. Actually, the wheat and barley is only causing problems for the geese in the harvest season. So yes, if you continue growing wheat and barley, you should do something to make the harvest losses unavailable for geese. We came up with an agreement to do that within 48 hours after harvesting. How to do that? So first we thought they should plow the ground to really put it under, but it's a clay soil and plowing takes a long time. So the agreement was to do it with a cultivator. And if you do it well with a cultivator, the little seeds, they will fall down in the soil. So if the geese go there to look for the food, they will not be able to find it because it's hidden in the soil. It's all voluntarily because we do not have a law. Well, we don't want to have a law to make it mandatory. While it is voluntarily, it creates real commitment and enthusiasm. Farmers feel involved and responsible. Already within 2 years, we got 95% of the farmers participating. Of course, it's a financial component. So the compensation is 787 euros per hectare. It's multiple parameters, but the two most important are they are not allowed to harvest the straw, so that has to go in the ground as compost. Because if we wouldn't let harvest, it should dry a bit, and it takes more time, and then it gives the geese more time to go. And extra labor, machinery, etc. So the amount was 787. We did the counts of the seeds before harvesting, well, before this agreement and after. And we found that like 95% of the availability of the seeds was reduced. So where we used to have 25 kilos on average per hectare, that's only now 1 available after they worked the ground with the cultivator. Then we would expect a decrease in the number, but our weekly counts, they show that while this agreement is already there since 2012, we still have a harvest peak. We do not know how high the peak would have been without this agreement. It may have been double or triple or tenfold. Still, we have a peak during the harvest season. So apparently it is still profitable for the geese to come and look. Maybe they just come and look instinctively because it has always been profitable to go to that area. They stay relatively short, so the peaks are short. And the other peaks you see are the winter peaks. then they come for the other food like sugar beets, potato, etc. So in the harvest season of all these food products, there was always some food for the geese as well. So the second item we had for the 4-track approach was, can we mitigate the breeding or the resting areas? Well, yes, we could, of course. Everything's possible, but it's legally very difficult. And the city of Amsterdam, 1 million people living there, they want nature areas around them. They want recreation areas. Since we are below water level, sea level, we have a big water problem. So we need to retain our water. On one side, we want to get rid of it, but we were so successfully getting rid of the water that now sometimes with the dry summers, we have a problem with dry areas. If the area is getting too dry, the water from the North Sea is being pushed underground to the surface, creating salty water, which is bad for for the agriculture or for the nature area. So it's really a puzzle how to balance that. But it's yeah, it is difficult to do anything about the resting and breeding areas, the areas itself. So and another thing, as with the licenses, they were decentralized from the state to the provinces. In the past, the CAA, they had to approve the creation of bird attractive habitats. Now there's a change of policy. The local municipality is being held responsible. To avoid any conflicts, they should show a risk assessment to prove that the creation of new habitat will not attract hazardous birds. With this, it's always very difficult because you can say, like today, if we have this plan, we will expect a certain amount of birds, but nature is not always following algorithms. So you may be surprised in the future, and then how to reverse things to the normal level. So this is also a problem that we should tackle together. The third thing, if the geese will still be there and we will not be able to get other crops or mitigate the areas, would it be possible to detect the geese crossing the airport and then change the flight schedule of the aircraft? Well, we are still working on that as well. Amsterdam has bird radars, and we are still having an ongoing study how to get this radar information to ATC and how ATC can work on that. Schiphol is a very busy airport, so if you want to slow down the operation for 5 or 10 minutes to let the geese pass, then there's a whole kind of snowball effect for all the other flights that are coming in or have to go out. So it's a complex situation for such a big airport as well. And then, of course, the solution that people will always tell me as a first solution when I explain them this topic. Why don't you simply kill all the geese? Well, as said, they are protected. But we got some agreements with BirdLife Netherlands and nature organizations and the provinces to give license to kill. But that's all under very strict nature laws. So yes, they are under the for flight safety and also for to protect the crops, as Jesper earlier explained. So the population is, well, not being reduced, but geese are being killed. Then it's always the question, how is nature balancing itself? if the carrying capacity is still not reduced, the number of geese will always try to reach the balance there. So what are the future developments? We are looking for profitable crops for the farmers that are not attractive for the geese. Well, biofuel is looking for crops, building material, textile hemp. We also got some big plots with solar panels. Then you can't grow any crop there, but the geese are not interested to go there over there either. Big question still, can we mitigate the resting and breeding areas? Still looking for how to detect the geese and how to change the flight schedule, ongoing research. And how to reduce the population of geese? Well, that's the topic of this webinar. We have to evaluate the current methods. Maybe there are new expelling techniques. I'm happy to learn from other experiences. Would it be possible to have extra hunting efforts, etc., etc.? So lots of things to research yet, to discuss, and I'm looking forward to the other presentations. I would like to thank you. If there are any questions, I don't know what the time is. If I have time, or maybe during.
Yes, I think. Thank you, Albert. Thank you very much for your presentation. Maybe one or two clarifying questions.
Yeah, be welcome.
Jens Erik Ditlevsen, please.
Thank you. Well, it was something that Albert didn't really get into, but I still would like to know, in the EU, there is a mandatory reporting obligation according to the regulation 376 in the EU. Albert, do you have any sense of the discipline of reporting? Is it done routinely? And do you, as an authority, have dependable data on the number of bird strikes on a yearly basis?
Yes, Erik, thank you for your question. We have, and in the next presentation, Schiphol will present some figures about it.
Okay.
Because they are our primary, with the airliners, of course, our primary data source. So I would like to leave it with that.
Yes.
Thank you. I see no further questions in the chat. So if you have any, keep it for the general discussion, and we'll move on to Schiphol and have more details about the situation in Amsterdam Airport.
Thank you very much. I will start sharing my screen. So, do you see my screen? Can you confirm that, please?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Thank you so much. Well, welcome every day, and thank you, Albert. Yes, let's continue. My name is Rosanne Blijleven. I will be presenting today together with my colleague Yvonne Versteeg. I'm working as compliance specialist EASA for Schiphol Airport and for the Department of Asset Management. And Yvonne is working for another department, which is Asset Operations, and she is the service owner the service owner aircraft Flora and Fauna, I have to say. So a little bit of repetition compared to Albert's presentation, but we promise to keep that information very short to keep your attention. So this is Amsterdam Airport Schiphol. You can see it in the middle, which is located in the Netherlands, surrounded by forest, wetlands, water bodies, meadows, a lot of agricultural sites. And Albert already mentioned that we are laying very low, and Schiphol is actually the lowest laying airport in the world, located minus 4.5 meters below sea level, so which is a lot. And well, this makes it a true bathtub for for both standing and migrating geese, because it's used for resting, feeding, migrating, etc., and breeding as well. So what's the problem? Well, we all know about it, and Albert mentioned the bird strike with the Royal Amarok, which was in fact a near crash in 2010. Well, with significant damage, as you can see, it was a terrifying strike, so to say, with a group of Canadian geese, and luckily no lives were taken, but it was a very close call. And we were facing a lot of operational costs, as you can see over here as well, to clean the runway, etc. But I mentioned this strike as well because it was the start of that there was a lot of attention towards the subject, and this incident raised awareness towards the risk on bird strikes, high-risk species, and possible impact. So a safety report was delivered, and well, this has led to an action plan, including a national agreement, and Yvonne will tell you more about it. So Yvonne, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Rosanne. The result of this bird strike with geese, as you can see, is very attractive also for birds of prey. Of course, this debris can also cause problems for the next plane, so it's really important to clean after every strike. This year we had a lot of bird strikes with starlings, more than ever before. And also this species is it's not very high risk, but still a lot of work. And next. Our government initiated the setup of a covenant, and this agreement is on how to participate and take responsibility on geese management as far as possible within the participants' own possibilities. The covenant has a 4-track policy, as shown here, which means 4 different focus areas to take measures. We use this 4-track policy also for our roadmap at Schiphol Airport, because it's beside the law obligations, also proven very useful to look at the measures from different perspectives. The main action Schiphol took after the incident with the Amarok was implementing a bird radar system. We are gaining more knowledge about different high-risk species, and it's a useful tool for our bird control team. Next. This graphic shows the bird strikes with geese only on airport for a period of 2005 until last year. And as you can see, the number of bird strikes with geese are stable and maybe decreasing in spite of the still growing numbers of the geese population in the Netherlands. We noticed that the presence of geese on airside is decreased over time, but we do think this is because of all the measures on and around our airport together, because we still see and detect high numbers of geese on the grounds surrounding Schiphol. We can also see that on our radar system. The habitat outside is still in favor of geese. And because we own quite some land around the airport, and the presence has still the potential risk of runway crossings, within Schiphol there became a shift of focus also towards measures on the outside of the airside as well. Next. The bird strike risk is, of course, not only on and above our own territory at the airport. Bird strikes do also happen outside of the boundaries of airside. Here you can see the recorded bird strikes of the Royal Dutch Airlines for a period of 4 years accumulated. These are bird strikes with all kinds of birds. We used this evidence to apply for an extra exemption on several high-risk species, not for geese, because they were already in place. These were more for gulls and herons and cormorants and even lapwings in the surroundings of Schiphol. Next, Rosanne. And this is our roadmap on geese measures only. We do have other measures for other species like birds of prey, but according to our geese focus of today, we left out the other measures of the roadmap. Along the axis, you can see the 4 tracks. And the roadmap has several timelines across the road in yellow. And the measures on the left below the yellow lines are the ones we have implemented already. The white blocks on the road are the measures initiated and coordinated and mostly paid for by several government bodies or agencies. And the colored blocks are Schiphol measures. If we start at the left, the purple ones, you can see the Roman radar and ongoing data analysis and the standard spoken warning for pilots approaching and departing Schiphol. And to the right in the green, we have the foraging track. For geese, it's mainly water and grass management. We want no puddles on the field, and we try to select and test the most unattractive grass types. We also manage the height of grass. Then the blue ones, the population track, that's a shared track with government measures. We have 24/7 bird control to manage birds on air side. Then you have the geese management plan by government agencies with exemptions for geese for the surrounding areas of Schiphol. We also have a cooperation with the hunters, our neighboring hunters. We try to help them with storage and refrigerator for geese to sell them. And above that is the government is looking towards measures maybe with special prevention teams, but that's future. Then you can see the spatial track. Next year, the pilot with new harvest technique, Albert talked about, also regulation on crop residues and the advisory board for to check new initiative in land use on the attractiveness of birds. And on the left in the yellow, we have our Grass for Grain project as a change in land use. And Rosanne will tell you more about that. The government also tried Flex for Grain, and you can see the governance we talked about earlier. I give you back the word, Rosanne.
Thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, so Yvonne already mentioned it. I will tell you more about Grass for Grain, which is our one of our policies, I have to say, because it's not a project anymore. So I would like to mention it because I think that's really important, that that it's something that we have to deal with, and that's how we consider how to deal with habitat in our surroundings. So at least for our own grounds. So okay, well, Grass for Grain, it involves two things. The first one is airside, which means removal of grass cuttings, clippings. And on the other hand, and it started with the landside part, that the grain was replaced by grass as a rotation crop between beet, onion, and potato. And this is only for the grounds that we own and that had rural lease contracts. because we were able to change those contracts. So that's why we started with those grounds. Well, it involves a guaranteed takeoff of the grass harvest. So we pay the farmers for it and we take off the harvest. There will be a sustainable process of having of getting the actual fibers in the end, because the grass has to be washed and everything. There are a few stages to get to end up with only the fibers, because that's only the fibers are used. They're used to make panels, grass panels, which are used at Schiphol in some ways. I will tell you more about it. And the grass panels are recycled by the processor. So that's like the circle. And of course, this is all based on to increase flight safety, because grain is attracting geese year round. So we try to avoid having grain harvested our own grounds, soils. Okay, so the product that is made from the fibers is equal to chipboard, fiberboard, particle board. We received a fire classification in the past, so it can be used in the terminal as well, which is really important because we have pretty high standards, safety standards in the terminal. And for example, it is processed to a basic panel to start with, and from the basic panel you can make different materials like building materials, furniture, paper, like ceilings, but also relational gifts, or the one that you see on the right is a Christmas gift that we gave to our Schiphol employees, and this is made from our Schiphol grass fibers. So it's really nice to really have it in your hands and to even smell the grass. So that's that's quite amazing. And there's a little story behind it. So this is made from the panel, the basic material, and actually you can make everything from the panels that you can compare to the quality that you want to have when you need something like chipboard, fiberboard, or particle board. So I would like to tell you just shortly about the stakeholders to give you an idea what it involves, to start some kind of a project leading towards a true policy. Well, at Schiphol, airside operations, real estate and asset management are the main stakeholders. Of course, asset operations because of bird control, both on and off airside, and the role they play in the entire field of work. Real estate as the owner of the grounds in the surrounding. And I work for asset management, so that's why asset management is mentioned over there as well. Well, in the surrounding, we worked with the neighbors, so to say the leaseholders, the farmers, so the rural contract leaseholders. The Netherlands Agricultural and Horticultural Association, so LTO, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, and supportive in my daily work regarding this policy is a supervisor who's always around, having eyes on the ball, so to say, because when you replace grass, when you replace grain for grass, we have strict matters to how to deal with it, how to deal with standing water, for example, at the grass height, because you don't want to attract more birds or other birds or anything like it. So it holds a lot. We work with a steward who is communicating, in fact, between me and the farmers. And of course, we need a processor of the fibers who's taking care of the fibers, the harvest, and to process the fibers into the panels. And that's the same party that's who is like making the panels, delivers the panels, and we recycle them back to the same processor. So just a quick overview, we started in 2019 with the actual contract. So we started before that, I think a year before, working with universities, everything to find out is there something that might be a good replacer for grain. So it was quite a search. So the actual contract was delivered, I think by the end of 18. So we had a 4-year contract. So it ended last year. We updated it. We took care of continuation and extension of the contracts. We're currently still in that process. And of course, for the future, we will focus on evaluation, continuation, and extension of the amount of hectares, because no other grounds will be, it's not allowed anymore at our own grants or at our own grounds to harvest grain. So there will be becoming more numbers of hectares, including this policy. Oh, sorry. So that's about it for now. I think there is some time for questions, but I'm not hosting the webinar, so it's not on me. I would like to thank you, and also on behalf of Yvonne, of course, for your attention. And we would love to hear if you have any questions or ideas. Please share it with us after these presentations, or leave it for the discussion. It's up to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rosanne and Yvonne. I see no questions in the chat, but maybe I didn't really catch up. But anybody having questions for the three presentations concerning Schiphol? One short question. Yes, Jens Erik Ditlevsen, please.
Thank you. Sorry for coming back again, but just a short question for clarification. You talk about landside actions. To what extent are they also implemented in areas not owned by the airport?
Jens, do you mean the grass for grain policy measure or something else?
I mean that also, yeah.
Because grass for grain is only applicable at our own grounds. So our own that we own, because we have influence on those pieces of ground. So that was the first step for us to take action. But other measures, maybe Yvonne, you can tell something about it, in what extent it is implemented landside scale.
No, landside, we look towards landside because we see there are still problems there. But mostly if we have ideas about measures, we have close contact with the government agencies who are responsible for that area, and sometimes we do pilots together. But most of the times in the surrounding area, it's the government who has the lead for the measures.
Maybe you can tell something about the example of the pigs, Yvonne, because that's a shared example. Maybe that's nice to tell something about it.
Yeah, last year we had a pilot on crop residues of sugar beets. We tried to let pigs eat the residue and measure how much time they took to clean a field. And it was also a question of, because every year there's hundreds of hectares of sugar beets surrounding Schiphol. And could we, I don't know how to say, this measure, for how many hectares would this measure be relevant? And and the conclusion was it was very hard to combine two different branches, the one of the pigs and the meat and the sugar beet logistics planning. It was very complicated. So yeah, that's one example.
And maybe one last thing from my side. Oh, and I see another question. I forgot to mention that the fibers, both from airside and landside, are equally utilized and processed into the panels combined with paper. It cannot be on itself because otherwise the panels will be too weak to provide strong material that can be used. So it's a mix from both land and airside fields combined with paper.
Actually, I have one question for you. I don't know if it's Albert or Yvonne or Rosanne who's best able.
We'll figure it out.
You show that the land use, the change of land use practices with the sort of that you take the grain out after 48 hours. You either harrow it or whatever you do. That's successful, but you still see geese on the land subsequently. What is actually the feeding habitats of birds apart from the grain then? Is it potatoes, sugar beet, or what's the main habitat?
Oh, in the grain season, July, August, the sugar beets and potatoes are still in the ground, so they are not harvested yet. So the geese are just trying, you know, and if they have not success within a certain amount of trials, they just continue to the grain, the wheat and barley fields south of Schiphol Airport that are not having this regulation. So even in the wider area, there's food available. So the area we are doing this this arrangement is directly next to Schiphol Airport. But further south, we still have the same area because we actually do the northern part of this reclaimed polder, and the southern part there was also still food. Research showed with the connection between sleeping and foraging areas that only this part is causing the problems with geese crossing the airport. So,
yeah, what we have seen at Schiphol by radar is that like every stage, every process, every stage of harvesting grain is attracting birds in some way. So that's why we, to our knowledge and to our experience, what we've seen the last years, so the first 4 years of this policy, is that it has a positive effect on the number of birds. So, and with positive, I mean that we've seen less birds compared to grain. So that's positive in my point of view.
I just have one more question from Alessandro Montemaggiore.
Yes, thank you. Well, okay, thank you very much. Now, I just would like to know if you have some figures about the culling, and if you think it was effective or is still effective or not in decreasing the geese population around the Schiphol Airport.
No, we have no numbers on the culling surrounding Schiphol. Sorry. Those numbers are within the government. They do not report back to us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's be the last question then. We have 10 minutes break now. Reconvene 14:25. And looking forward to the next presentation from Copenhagen and Norway, respectively. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mogens Hansen, and I'm working in Copenhagen Airport as a biologist, and I have been employed there for more than 25 years. And thank you for the invitation to this webinar and for the possibility to present our experience in dealing with good strike risk to flight safety. Copenhagen Airport is serving 25 million passengers annually by more than 240,000 movements. The airport is situated south of the city of Copenhagen, surrounded by brackish waters at both sides. Further, the airport is located close to the Sweden on the right hand. Farmland and suburban gardens and parks are the main habitats close to the airport. Finally, a few kilometers from the airport, we have two large bird sanctuaries, Vestamager and the island Saltholm. Copenhagen is situated in the main corridors of bird migration from Scandinavia and the western part of Russia. Yes, please. Yeah. 4 species of geese are recorded regularly in the vicinity of Copenhagen Airport. However, the Canada goose is present in very small numbers, and the brent geese are migrating in a safe distance from the airport and well below the flight corridors of the aircraft. The remaining 2, the Barnacle goose and Greylag goose, are the real troublesome species. The Barnacle goose is by far the worst. Next, please. Until 20 years ago, geese were mostly observed as passing migrants in small numbers. However, recently, geese are passing the airport very frequently and in steady increasing numbers. Besides, more geese are settling in the fields in the vicinity to the airport. Please shift. Consequently, we are facing more goose strikes in the last year. Now goose strikes are occurring annually. Yes, please shift. Looking at this table, you can realize that different populations are involved, and they occur in the vicinity of the airport during different situations, depending on where they are coming from and where they are going to. I'll come back to this table in more detail later. Looking to the right of the table, the phenology of different populations indicates that hazards are present all months, and for a single month, we are facing different and distinct hazards. Next, please. Looking at the migrating geese passing the airport, the Barnacle geese is by far most the dominant species. During September and October last year, we were able to radar track a significant part of the Siberian Baltic population of Barnacle geese. We are not in position to solve this problem locally, since the problem only can be solved through an international effort. We can only mitigate the problem to a very limited extent by means of active management carried out by our bird conservers. And I will come back to this topic later. Please shift. Not all geese passing the airport will continue their migration further to the Waddensee area. In the last decade, thousands of Barnacle geese and small numbers of Greylag geese are beginning to settle down at the agriculture fields in the airport vicinity. Our main takeoff runway is surrounded by farmlands and so by geese. One can easily imagine how flocks of geese can cross the runway when they move from one feeding area to another, or when they fly to and from for the roasting sites. And it happens too. And again, I will come back to this topic later. So can I have the next slide? At the beginning of the 1990s, we became aware that a large number of Greylag geese had found the southeastern part of the island of Saltholm suitable for the annual molt of flight feathers. Individual marking of Greylag geese in Sweden and subsequent resightings of the marked geese on Saltholm and in Sweden showed that a very large proportion of the molting geese came from Sweden and that they returned to Sweden after molting. We therefore did not perceive this phenomenon as particularly risky for air traffic at that time. In recent years, however, the number of molting geese has increased significantly with up to 40,000 geese, and at the same time, we started to see small flocks of Greylag geese in the fields close to the airport in May and in summer. Firstly, we do not know in which direction and what height the Greylag geese fly to and from Saltholm, and from where, and whether the geese thereby cross the flight corridor of aircraft along the way. Secondly, we cannot be sure that the grey geese observed in spring and late summer will is connected with the bird flocks, the geese flocks we observe in the surroundings. Immediately, the first reaction could be to exclude the Greylag geese from the molt era on Saltholm, but in that case, it had to be done in the most ethical way with the greatest possible concern for the geese involved and for the other avifauna on the island. However, it will be necessary beforehand to document the extent to which the molting geese pose a real risk to the flight safety. Next, please. What can we as an airport do right now to address the hazards and risks posed by birds? As a concessionary, Copenhagen Airport is responsible for dealing with birds both inside and outside the airport, the so-called 13-kilometer safeguard zone. It is determined in the European aviation legislation, however, it's only when the area of the airport that we have a free hand to act. Next slide, please. Inside the airport, we perform active management by the means by pilot technique used by our bird controllers, and they shot geese when they are settled on the field. The bird controller use also parrot techniques to direct migrating flocks of geese away from the aircraft flight corridors if possible. Further, the bird controllers want pilots of crossing flocks of geese via radio contact to the tower. Finally, bird controllers ensure that warnings are issued to pilots about crossing flocks of geese on edges. Next, please. Inside the airport, we also have passive management. Our maintenance department allowed the grass to grow more than 20 centimeters before cutting it down to 15 centimeters. This grass height is much higher than the Barnacle goose prefers. Further, our maintenance department is reseeding the existing grass with endophyte containing seeds of tall fescue and ryegrass that act as a feeding deterrent and caused post-ingestion distress in geese. Yeah, next slide, please. Reseeding grass with endophyte containing grass seeds is an expensive and a complicated process in an airport, especially when it's not allowed to use herbicides. So that the huge amount of seeds and fertilizer has to be used when we are not allowed to use herbicides. Yes, next, please. Although we have a free hand to act against birds inside the airport, the situation is different outside. Copenhagen Airport has no authority to dictate change goose-friendly use of private and public lands outside the airport. Only by negotiation and or with financial compensation, Copenhagen airports can achieve desired changes that can prevent attractive conditions for geese. And that is what we are doing now. Please shift. We have already launched initiatives outside the airport. Initially, we have looking at the goose hunting outside the perimeter fence as a mitigating measure to disperse the geese further away from the airport. Copenhagen Airport has already arranged for local landowners that they have licensed all year to shoot Barnacle geese, Greylag, and Canada goose on the agricultural land around the airport. We have hired the Aarhus University to investigate the opportunities to improve and intensify the hunting of geese. This project is ongoing in collaboration with local landowners and hunters. Next, please. At the same time, we are looking at how we can make the fields in the vicinity more unfriendly to geese with changed crop selection. This project will be long-term and requires cooperation with both the landowners and the environmental authorities. Next, please. We have hired experts to calculate the possible amount of discharge of nitrogen into the aquatic environment because of the changed crop selection. Copenhagen Airport is in negotiations with the environmental authorities how to reduce the nitrogen discharge from changed types of crops. Yes, please. So we are challenged with goose population that are constantly increasing in number. At the same time, the geese show surprising opportunism when it comes to exploring new resources in time and space. These are posing a mild threat to air traffic over large parts of the world, and in Copenhagen Airport, these are by far the biggest threat to flight safety all year round. Despite our efforts in various ways to deal with the Geese, we often have to admit that we lack sufficient knowledge about where exactly the Geese come from and what the Geese are doing in the broader sense in the vicinity of the airport. That knowledge is important to have when choosing the right strategy against Geese and making wise decisions. Yes, and that's my presentation, and I would like to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Mogens. And I have a comment from Anastasios saying, really challenging situation. We wish you success with your efforts. And I think that's more of a comment than a question. Do we have any questions from the audience to Mogens? Maybe also related to the Danish policy that Mogens is alluding to? Doesn't really seem to be the case. It was a clear, very crisp presentation, so thanks for that.
Yeah.
And, in which case, we will move on to the final presentation from Norway, given by Trond, Øigarden, and Andersen. If you mind taking the word and presenting yourselves, please.
Yes, if Trond can show the presentation. Yes.
Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Jan Andersen. I'm a senior advisor for airport operations. Act as a chief advisor for wildlife control in AVINOR, and also the chairman of the National Bird Strike Committee. Worked in with these cases for the last 7 years in AVINOR. Also acting with winter operations and inspections and yes. Trond can present himself. I can present AVINOR. AVINOR is wholly owned by the state as a state limited company under the Ministry of Transportation. We run 43 airports and the air traffic control service for all civilian and military airports in Norway. We have an income of about 6 billion Norwegian kroner. We have 2,800 employees. We have served about 22.4 million passengers in 2021. We have 563,000 movements of aircraft in 2021. Next, please.
Sorry, before you move on, we have a lot of background noise from some microphones which are not closed. So could you all please make sure that your microphones are switched off, and maybe that Jan and Øystein, you would also just close your mics when you're not speaking.
Is it better now? Is it better now?
Jan,
No.
maybe we can ask you to speak up also a little bit.
Is it better now?
No.
Do you hear me? I have some trouble with my microphone.
Okay, yeah, but just go on, Jan. We'll listen carefully to what you say.
If you speak a bit louder, that could be helpful, Jan. Thank you.
Okay, I'm almost shouting, so it's difficult. The social impact of aviation and AVINOR. AVINOR is have a network of airports around the country, and in the most remote places in Norway, the airports are like bus stops in cities. They need airports to get to hospitals and other services around. The airports also create a lot of value for the Norwegians. We also have operate the airspace in Norway from Norway to the North Pole by AVINOR Flysikring. It's a connected company, and we take care of socially critical tasks in close collaboration with the actors in the airports. That's a presentation of me and AVINOR, and then Trond can get on with the rest. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Trond Øigarden. I work at the Dokka Delta National Wetland Center as an ornithologist. We are located in an international Ramsar site, the Dokka Delta Nature Reserve, and we are a nature competence center and a consultancy firm offering a wide range of environmental services with nature guidance, ecological restoration, habitat conservation, maintenance and surveying, biological diversity monitoring and mapping, biological diversity surveys. And we also provide ornithological services to AVINOR. So that's my job. AVINOR's focus is on medium-sized and large birds and on birds in flocks. And AVINOR has a strong focus on geese. Geese are large, they are increasing in number. And we know that geese were the cause of the emergency landing on the Hudson River in 2009. And it's important to AVINOR to meet researchers, authorities, and others daily work with goose. At this conference in Skåne, we first came in contact with EGMP. Why are airports attractive? Many airports are relatively safe areas that invite geese to seek food and rest. There are, for example, few people and no dogs around the runway. Many Norwegian airports are located along the coast, close to the geese's migration routes, and many airports are close to farmland and wetlands. In Norway, you can find at least 9 species of geese, but Greylag goose and pink-footed goose are the most common ones, and also those who cause concern on Norwegian airports. The Greylag goose Norwegian breeding population consists of about 50,000 individuals, and they breed along the Norwegian coast with a smaller population in inland areas. And the pink-footed goose, that's the Svalbard population. It's about 100,000 individuals, and they migrate mainly through the valleys of eastern Norway and have a stopover site in the northern part of Trondheim. So here you can see the migration routes of the 2 species, the Greylag goose on the left and the pink-footed goose on the right. And we will later talk about Trondheim Airport, and that's it's located here. There are also other airports that struggle with geese. Some examples of other airports with geese major challenge. We have done some mitigation measures to try to prevent conflicts between geese and aircraft. The main picture here is from Brønnøysund. The geese spend the night on the runway, grazing on the grass areas of the airport and on the surrounding areas. and there can be about 100 to 200 birds in the morning. The geese leave a lot of dirt on the runway. It takes the workers about an hour to clean the runway in the morning in the season. And this is mainly one non-breeding individuals. At Alta Airport, that is located on a large intertidal area, a traffic ban has been introduced at the resting area for lesser white-fronted geese. We hope this will also keep the Greylag geese away from the airport, as it will prevent that hikers scare the geese towards the airport. And in Lakselv Airport, that's the sign up to the left on the slide, we collaborate with BirdLife Norway, who monitors Greylag geese in the Porsangerfjord. And the sign urges hikers to show consideration so the birds are not scared towards the airport. And they have one goose with a GPS tracker in the Porsangerfjord area. So an overview of the bird strike with geese the last 5 years. It's been 6 bird strikes, one at Svalbard, Longyearbyen, with a Barnacle goose, and the other 5 bird strikes with Greylag goose. And the last one in Trondheim in 2002. And this is a picture of the aircraft after the bird strike in September 2002. It's not only workers at the airport that report of increasing number of geese. This is 2 articles from a local newspaper. 2020, record number of Greylag geese in Stjørdal this year. And 2021, huge flocks fly over Stjørdal. There have never been so many at once. In Stjørdal, that is the municipality where Trondheim Airport is located. The Greylag goose rest near Trondheim Airport from mid-August to late October. And the pink-footed goose rest near Trondheim Airport from mid of September until start of November. Here we have a risk analysis from Trondheim Airport from 2020. And you can see that the pink-footed goose and the Greylag goose come on red in this risk matrix. There are 2 types of migration, the annual spring and autumn migration, and these movements cannot be hindered. And we have the daily movements between resting and foraging areas, and we concentrate on reducing these movements over the airport area. This video shows pink-footed goose crossing over the taxiway and the runway at Trondheim Airport in spring. So they are hard to hinder. They are on their way to the resting site a bit north in the Trondheimsfjord area. A little about what we did in the season 2021. We have a map here with the yellow areas, that is resting areas in the sea, and the green and red areas that are feeding areas. And we want to stop the crossing of geese from the yellow resting areas to the red feeding areas. So we tried to get the geese to rest in the western of these 2 yellow areas and feed in the green areas. So when the geese was in the eastern yellow area, we tried to scare them over to the other area. But this implementation produced varying results, especially difficult to get the geese away from the eastern yellow resting area, and it was resource intensive and only partly successful. But we saw that autumn plowing was effective. So there was an increasing understanding of the need of other measures. Conventional monitoring and intimidation is not enough to change the behavior pattern of the geese in the vicinity of the airport. So then we arranged a conference on Trondheim Airport in May 2022. And the participant of that conference was the Norwegian Environment Agency, represented by Jo Anders Auran, Norwegian Farmers Union, represented by Ove Martin Gundersen, Norwegian Institute of Nature Research, represented by Ingrun Tomre and Arne Follestad, and BirdLife Norway, the Norwegian Air Force, Cockpit Association of Norway, Scandinavian Airlines, the Civil Aviation Authority of Norway, Trondheim Airport, and AVINOR. And there was made out a strategy for the season 2022. North of the airport is in the middle here between these two maps. Cornfields in green should not be plowed in the autumn and be hunting free. Tranquility and food. This year, agreements have been signed on hunting rentals with several landowners. In selected areas on the north side of runway, on the sea, the geese should be allowed to rest, and that includes both the yellow area from the previous map. South of the airport, cornfield should be harvested and hunting controlled. No tranquility and no food. This year, an agreement was signed on autumn plowing for a couple of areas. In more details, the measures we have carried out at the airport are the following. We have entered into an agreement with 7 landowners north of the airport for hunting-free zones in their fields. We have paid out landowners for early fall plowing on the south side of the river. That's the red areas. In the south, we have performed manual scaring during the day. We have hired an ornithologist, Tom Roger Østerås, to count geese from August to November. The local ornithologist has reported to the airport how many geese have stayed in the area from week to week. And the status. We saw that there was half as many geese in the area as in 2021. So then it's not very easy to tell how effective our measures are. But the reduction of crossing our runway has been seen, and that's probably a result of reduced feeding areas south of the airport. The most important feeding fields were plowed right after grain harvest in the south. Here is a graph of the number of geese around Trondheim Airport in autumn, the 3 last years. So you can see that there was a very high number in 2021. So what to do next year or this autumn, coming autumn? Fields in the south must be plowed as soon as the grain is harvested. Expanding area with autumn plowing on the south side, more deals with farmers. expanding areas with hunting agreements in cooperation with municipalities, etc. We should rephrase agreements and also take into account the requirements, needs of the leaseholders. So we have to have an agreement both with the landowner and the leaseholder. At the resting area in north, the birds must be given as much peace as possible. Areas in the north, on green on the maps, these are areas where landowners should not plow until the November the 1st. And goose should not be hunted north of the airport. And we will continue monitoring of geese around Trondheim airport. And soon there will be held a meeting with Ove Martin Gundersen from the Norwegian Farmers Union to get a kind of a brainstorming meeting. And there also planned a meeting with the AVINOR's ornithologist in May to sum up and discuss plan for the autumn. And we hope that we can get some GPS tagging of geese in the area. So, to sum up, the main strategy is to keep areas in north attractive and make areas in south unattractive, and thereby prevent crossing of the runway. So that's my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Trond. And Jan. Any questions? Immediate questions for Jan and Trond regarding the Norwegian situation?
If there aren't any questions, I can tell we have a bird radar at the Trondheim airport, but it's not. It's too slow to register all goose flying in, so we have to look manually in several cases to track the goose.
Thank you for that additional information. Well, then let's move into sort of the more general question session. I know we have quite some participants from the EGMP community, but I can also see that there's quite a lot of people that I personally don't know, and I guess that many of you are from some other European airports or authorities related to air safety, etc. So maybe some of you would like to take the word. And I don't know how to start that directly, but I'll just open the floor for any comments, any questions, or any additional information that you would like to contribute.
Hi all. I'll say hello. Firstly, thank you very much for bringing this together and all the speakers. It's been a fascinating session and very much appreciated. My name's Andy Baxter. I work across the UK, well around the world on bird strike issues in aviation. So nice to meet you and hello.
Welcome, Andy, and thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, very welcome. And yeah, it's a fascinating area. We're very much involved, or colleagues involved, in avian flu at the moment. So that was one that I thought would be an interesting point as to how that's going to affect particularly populations of geese, because I know it's having a fairly devastating effect across wintering grounds in the UK at the moment. But really just in terms of everybody who's presented, and particularly in terms of Norway, the discussions, or the last set of discussions around local goose management issues, which is where an airport has an ability to influence, control at a local scale is exactly the sorts of things that have been done across many airports, and it's actually very good to see and hear those activities still going on, a review of where those birds are moving to and from, and then making a really sensible approach to, well, actually, it's not about removing all the birds from within a given vicinity of an aerodrome. It's about controlling the risks that arise. So really just wanted to comment and back up everything that's been said in terms of the same things being done elsewhere, with a particular airport in the UK that's had fairly major goose problems from resident Canada and Greylag and Egyptian goose populations rather than migratory populations. But nevertheless, a 20-25 year program has been going on and on to continue that management, and has involved all of the above: the control of agricultural landscapes and farmland around airports, the hunting management on one side of an aerodrome and not the other, the control of water bodies on one side of an airport and not the other. And in that particular circumstance, we've rather than measuring it on numbers of geese, which have dropped, and the numbers of movements, which have also dropped, it's been very much measured on the number of bird strikes. And at the particular airport, this was having 2 or 3 multiple, i.e. more than one goose being struck at the same time, but multiple strikes every year up until the late 1990s. Management action then began and rolled through in exactly the processes that we've heard about today. And the result has been the number of strikes dropping through the early 2000s. And since 2004, that particular airport has had 1 goose strike. It still has the same presence of birds in the environment, but the behaviours of those birds has been managed locally. In opposition to that, and Rosanne and co at Schiphol and Copenhagen will all understand the big differences when you have huge numbers of migrating birds, and Mogens, huge numbers of migrating birds coming through that are flying through from potentially hundreds of miles away. And therefore, I think bringing together this forum is a great idea. I know the aviation community appreciates the chance to talk and discuss and understand better what can and can't be done in terms of bigger population movements, and to understand the conservation. So there's no questions in there, really just a comment that I think it's a good format, a great idea, and everything I've heard is positive in terms of trying to reduce that risk to aviation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andy. Next time we invite you to give a presentation about the UK situation, and I'm sure we can learn a lot from that, it seems. But nevertheless, at least in my view, we have a couple of issues here to discuss. We would really like to have your reflections about that, and you're already starting sort of to discuss that, Andy. The need for biological information. The EGMP is a bunch of goose experts and some authorities, of course, that try to manage geese in a sustainable way. We don't have the full overview of the air safety, flight safety issues, the concerns that you have in the airports, in order to actually be able to provide guidance to you. I think you are in a much better position actually to tell us what's up and down in this and what kind of information you need. But what I can see from the discussion today is that several of you have said we need to understand the behavior of geese. We need to understand more about the dynamics and the migration routines of geese. And this is what we can do. This is where we can support you, I think, from the EGMP side, because we have a lot of experts in the pool of people in the EGMP who actually work on that. So I would like to have sort of a small session where we could try to identify how can you sort of see the use of the EGMP knowledge in your work, so that we can start sketching how we most effectively can interact. So if any of you, apart from what Andy has already said, would try to give some words to sort of how we can actually support you in a way that is sort of providing you with good background information for your management. We really like to have that this conversation with you. So I'm opening the floor for any comments on that.
If no one is other want to say something, I have we have discussed this earlier, Jesper, but it would be important for the management of the airspace to know when the migration is starting. Because in Norway, the huge flocks flying along the coast in the middle of the air traffic highway, you can call it that. We need to know where the main migration is at the moment. We have tried to look at it, and we are using manually recordings to get it, but we are at least 24 hours late with the caution to the airplane companies. So this information can be critical in some parts. As you see the film from Trondheim, you can see the huge amount of geese in a flock. It depends on how high the level of the sky is, and the geese are always flying under the skies. So it can be very low at some points. So it can be a huge effect on the air traffic, especially on takeoff when we have a huge power on the engine. If you have if a bird hit the engine with a huge power, it get a great damage on the engine. And if it's in the landing position, in landing, they have not so much thrust on the engine, and it's not that big. The impact is the same, but the damage is not so big at the engine because it's how the engine is running. And it's a huge cost for the airplanes. I have heard one engine change at one airport in Norway was like 20 million euro. I don't know if that's correct, but maybe it's total cost with passengers not coming and going and fees to pay and to the passengers. So it's a huge cost.
Thank you, Jan. Andy, you raised your hand as well, I think.
Yeah, it was covering the silence to an extent, but it's I think I was wondering if there was anyone from Ireland here, but there was many years ago a long discussion about whether or not the productivity, the summer breeding productivity of some birds, some geese species could be brought forward so that there's an idea as to whether or not a large number of juvenile birds are likely to be migrating through. As a general principle, more young birds get struck than adult birds, but with migrating geese that tends to be slightly different because they are large direct flocks of birds that are coming and don't tend to recognize that an aircraft is a danger, hence they get struck. But also whether or not there's almost a line within which it begins in. So maybe northern Norway would be the warning station. We're starting to see geese moving through, and then they'd move through as they're heading south, right down through Denmark and Germany and into the Netherlands as to when those issues are arising. It doesn't solve any issues, but it provides a warning. One of the issues that pilots often face at aerodromes is a warning that there is a given bird problem. And if that warning is not focused on a specific time, it tends to be it tends to be ignored by pilots. Okay, there's always a warning at that airport, so there's nothing new to worry about. Whereas if it's focused and specific and says, look, there is currently this issue, and then that warning disappears again, it's more likely to be taken on board by pilots. So an accuracy of understanding whether birds are going to be coming through and when that occurs year on year. So whilst all the birds will migrate between September and November, isn't tight enough. It would be really useful to have that as a driver as to, in northern Norway, the birds will be coming through from early September and arriving into the Netherlands in November, and specific windows, that sort of thing, I think may be a benefit. So really a comment on that.
Thank you. That's extremely helpful, what the two of you say. One way of doing that could, of course, be via radar surveillance. Another way could be GPS tagging. In some of the populations of geese, we actually have GPS tags on quite a big proportion, or quite a big number of geese that actually can tell us something in a representative way about the migration movements of some of these populations. So that's definitely something that could be investigated further, if that could be an instrument that could be sort of be operating on time together with the needs for your purposes. Obviously.
I don't really know, Jesper.
I think before I give the word to people, I have the problem when you put up your hands that I can only see a very small fraction of you. So if you could please post your name in the chat. I'll give the word to Ove Martin Gundersen and then Arne Follestad. Thank you.
Hello, you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, there was some question about the hunting. The hunting around the airport at Barnacle, Trondheim Lufthavn Airport is, we tried in the south area that is showed with the red markers. We're going to hunt them hard in that area. So they learn that that area is dangerous, the same time you plow it up. But everything didn't work this year because we didn't get all the agreements. And the tagging thing with the GPS is also to try to see if the hunting around the area in another community affects the guests to, when the early hunting season starts and the derogation shooting starts, that they move to the airport because that's a safe spot for them. So the hunters in that area, they can't hunt around the airport anymore. So we're trying to find new areas for them. And I actually did that last year, some 20 kilometers away from the airport, actually. But that's the idea of this. And the GPS tags are to see if you can monitor them and also where they come from. If they come from local areas and derogation hunting actually make them go to the airport. So that was a short, brief note from me.
Thank you very much, Ove. Very helpful. Arne Follestad.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? I stay in Trondheim, and every early spring I see or hear pink feet crossing over Trondheim against the wetland areas longer further in the Trondheimsfjord, and they often pass Trondheim during night, late evening and midnight, and they have a very low flight. They can sometimes be seen in the light from the ground. I don't know why they do pass Trondheim and Trøndelag during night, but maybe they can navigate by light spots in the terrain. I'm not sure, but Trondheim is definitely the biggest light spot on that route. So if pink feet and greylegs are navigating in this way, passing Trondheim, we could, by using bird radar or maybe also, as Jesper suggested, use loggers to find the route. If I have a corridor that are migrating, at least then we could advise the airplanes to use another corridor when they are coming into Værnes or out. I can often see airplanes going exactly in that corridor, where I can hear the pink feet during the night.
Thank you. That's a very good comment, because I think that issue is a very special concern. Also in Copenhagen, you have Barnacle geese passing over the airport day and night in the peak passage time. And of course, the bird controllers can't see them at the time of the day because it's dark, and you can just hear them and sort of be a bit spooked about the numbers that you don't know about. So I think that is a really a critical issue that can be picked up now with the modern radar systems like the Robin radar that can actually detect birds in different size classes, and where you may eventually be able to also tell geese apart from other species. So I think we're facing also new technological advances that can actually bring us forward in the forecasting, at least in the vicinity of the airports, and with more intensive tagging of geese. You can also do that on the broader scale that Andy is talking about. So these two in combination could actually be quite an interesting way forward. My next question to you is actually a bit related, of course, to this. Is land use changes that you are working with in all three airports. This is a central theme in your approach, and Andy is also talking about sort of a success story from the UK. Would there be any virtue of sort of making some sort of forum for discussing this in more detail, where we could, as the sort of ecological experts, also provide you with some guidance or feedback, and maybe there would be some need for guidance that in a written format that the EGMP could support you with, because we already hear now from the presentations that you see actions that work and some that don't work. You need to adjust in an adaptive way. I think it could, at least from what I hear, be interesting to write some of this down to see what kind of combination of approaches do you need to take to be successful. Or am I just ignorant about sort of what has already been done, what has been written up and so forth? I'm not quite sure, but I think it seems like both in Copenhagen and in Schiphol and in Norway, you are looking into some different options, and maybe that you could make a step forward by compiling the information and the experiences gained from the other arenas. This is an open question. I don't know if any of you would like to comment on that. Maybe Schiphol, Copenhagen.
I can comment on that. We have done some research on the vegetation at the airport, but it's not it's not one size don't fit all. It's often use of local species that give the best effect for keeping the bird away. You use grass, local species that they don't like to eat, or that they don't like to sleep in, or it's depends on what the area have to offer the birds. We have to do a combination of them. Right now we are starting to build 2 big airports in Norway, and this is a problem. We don't know what's going to happen, either with seagulls or geese on that airports. And we are now trying to look after what's possible to do on those 2 airports. The one one airport is a coastal airport, and the other airport is an inland airport. It's so it's near the coast, but it's inland. So it's difficult to see what we can do. But we appreciate the offer to see if you can do anything, and if we can use some. If you have someone, we can ask questions from you. If you have something to share with us. I've talked with Andy for a couple of years ago on that problem, and he set us on some ideas how to manage the vegetation. And I think I also have talked with Mogens at Kostrup a couple of years ago on that problem. So if you have anything to take bring to the table, we will like it.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. Yeah, I'm just asking sort of openly in order to see what would be in your interest. But I saw Mogens was giving some sort of hands up. I don't know if you would like to qualify what you meant by that. Thumbs up.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a good idea to cover your knowledge for your special Geese studies, coupled with the airport personnel, so we can come to some conclusion. My main message with my presentation was, and is the lack of knowledge. We are needing knowledge how both knowledge about Geese in general, but special Geese on locally. So it's very important before you take a strategy to deter Geese. You have to have the full knowledge about the problem, about the Geese before you start any campaign. Otherwise, you can handle it blindly. And I can give you the example from Copenhagen Airport. We have breeding Barnacle Geese at Saltholm up to 4,000 pairs, and many are thinking, well, they could pose a risk for the flight safety in Copenhagen airports, and you have to cull all these Geese. But for 12 years ago, we hired Aarhus University to put on GPS transponder to 10 of the Barnacle Geese, and the result from that analysis showed us that nearly all the Barnacle Geese returned to Sweden after breeding and molting, and they stay in southern Sweden during summer, and they left Sweden directly to the Wadden Sea. So we any risk for that population, and that show us that you have to investigate the problem very closely before you act. So that's my comment to that. But we are always interested in every cooperation between you and other airports to handle that topics, and so we are ready to go to some meetings and discussion about that topics.
We can also put it the other way around. Sorry, if did I miss any? I have a comment here from RB. I'm not sure who that is. It's important to fairly distinguish active, reactive, preventive measures. The combination is key to success, in my opinion. Would RB? That's Rosanne. Sorry, Rosanne. That's now I see that. That's your name. Would you like to further elaborate on that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
I'm not sure Rosanne is hearing us. Okay, at least we got your comment. Now, let me then try to put it in another way. If you are excited about this meeting, I have quite a lot of people who have been happy about the call. If we're going to make another call, do we have any ideas about what would you like to discuss then? How would you like to see a progress in our conversation? What would be sort of a central theme for you for us to address? Is some of the lessons learned that you develop in the case studies and make more of that pool of shared experience? Or is it some more specific terms or issues like the use of radar, the forecasting systems, land management? We just want to know a bit about what's sort of on your priority list of concerns that you would like to discuss with us.
Well, if I can chip in again, that'd be.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Yeah, thanks. One of the drivers is around residential geese and more species becoming non-migratory. And I know that Mogens in Sweden particularly, but around Copenhagen with Barnacle geese and populations becoming resident in an area. The Netherlands, Belgium have seen a lot of Egyptian geese. So we're talking about feral geese in general. The UK, we have lots of discussions about Greylag geese and whether they are resident or migratory populations, and certainly up in northern Scotland and Orkney, it's a mix, and it's known to be a mix now from the GPS tracking. But that increase in resident populations, which does impact on what Jan was talking about in terms of each airport suffering individually and only affecting one airport, maybe not another one that could be within a very near vicinity. I can give an example of Heathrow and Gatwick Airport, which are both London airports, one of which has 2,000 or 3,000 Canada geese around it, the other one which has 100 Canada geese around it within the 13-kilometre vicinity. And yet these two airports, as the goose flies, are only 30 kilometres apart. So there can be big differences. But any indications about drivers of apologies if people hear a dog barking in the background, that's typical timing. Any indications of drivers behind when birds are becoming resident and are more likely to be shifting that way. That sort of driver will be very useful, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a very good point. Mikael Skalju, you have a comment in the chat. Would you like to take the word? I don't know if you are with us anymore. Michael made the comment that it's clearly international, EU rising problem. It needs attention from EASA and EU in terms of money and legal support. The problem will be growing as it was. I'm not quite sure that. Yeah. And there's another comment by John Lamont. We have that issue now in west of Scotland, Geese staying all year round. So yeah, that seems to be really a widespread concern, an issue that should be addressed in more detail. Sorry, it's really a bit tricky to read these chat when they are long comments. Yeah,
Yes,
Jens Erik Ditlevsen, since you're still around, would you mind to ask your make your comment? Thank you.
Sure. What I have written in the chat is that I would be interested to discuss more about how to mitigate in the surroundings, whether there are examples of dialogue with landowners. Do we use voluntary measures, or are there legal instruments that can be used? Also, do we need to take environmental authorities or agricultural authorities into consideration as well? I think that could be interesting.
Yeah, Jesper and Jens Erik, if I may, as I presented in the first presentation, we already are doing this in the Netherlands. So we have many question marks still, and we are writing down an action plan. So I'm actually inviting everyone to contribute to this. And Jesper, let's see how we can arrange future meetings, etc.
I also think that in Denmark we have some experience, or at least some considerations about this. But it would be really interesting to hear more about how others do these things.
Yeah, and I think this is a very good initiative to have this webinar as a kickoff for, well, let's call it a kickoff for a kind of Goose of Geese flight safety action plan.
Okay.
Or whatever we can call it.
Okay.
We need to work further on this, not only for the airports that are having problems now, but will have in the near future.
Okay, that's a concrete proposal.
Yes.
On which we can sort of build, and combined with some of the issues that the others have raised, that could sort of be contributions to something like that, maybe.
Yeah, and we need also we need examples from other countries as well to make our case stronger within the Netherlands. So everybody will benefit from that as well.
Yeah, and as we have heard some really interesting examples today about voluntary contributions from stakeholders, from landowners, etc.
Yeah.
That has advantages, but also some limitations.
Yeah.
And learning from those, I think, would be really interesting. And that's exactly also what we are diving into now with Copenhagen Airport and the collaboration that we've set up with Copenhagen Airport and the Environmental Agency. to see how we can get with the local contribution to the management outside the fences. And we do that actually in an adaptive iteration now over this winter season, month by month, to see what works, what didn't work, and then inviting the local hunters and stakeholders to meetings where we say, hey, we saw this reaction response by the Geese, and we have this record of your activities, and how can we tune that in order to sort of meet our goals?
Yeah. So anyone interested to help us with our action plan, well, be most welcome. And then we can have mutual benefits.
We probably need you to sort of describe what that document is, and before we can actually start discussing that further, Albert. So maybe we could invite you just to make sort of a short note about what your ideas are, and what kind of contributions you would like.
Yeah, I'll work on that for the next meeting.
Fantastic. I can see Martin Streit Nissen. Would you like to take the word?
Yes, please. Can you hear me? I'm
Yes.
talking through the phone. Thank you. I had a problem with the access, the computer access, but thank you, everyone. It has been a very interesting day, and I just have a single maybe legal reflection here, dovetailing what Albert said, and especially what Jens Dickerson said. I think that it is a stick in the wheel of the efficiency and intensity of our actions. This eternal discussion, who has the overall responsibility for areas not owned by the aerodrome? Is it the authorities? Is it the aerodrome? And it's the question that lies probably in between. It's not crystal clear from the legislation, and it would be very nice to discuss this further and maybe get EASA to clarify the division of responsibilities. It's clear that the aerodrome has a responsibility, and it's clear that the authorities have a responsibility. Is it a financial responsibility when it comes to the authorities? I don't know, but it's clear that in Schiphol the authorities has taken assumed a great responsibility, and other places it's different. But it would be very nice to discuss further. So yeah, that's my input, and thank you very much, everyone.
No, thank you very much. I think that's a very valid and important contribution and comment. So maybe that's one of the take-home messages also for sort of how to make action planning. All right. Jan Oos, would you like to share your comment? I see that in the chat. Problem with the mic.
His mic is not working, yeah.
So maybe we can read that out. I have to open that again. In the European airport community, we have a group sharing safety data, including bird and wild strikes, shared by Copenhagen Airport Safety Director, called SBG Safety Benchmarking Group. The subject, bird and wildlife, is on our agenda in relation to aviation safety. Okay, yeah. Nice, really helpful that you make that comment. We don't want to duplicate any effort here. And also to sort of explain that we are solely talking about this issue in relationship to goose management. So we want to sort of use our expertise to actually provide the evidence that you're needing. Okay. Any other comments? It seems that we have at least had a successful day according to the records I have on the chat. And I must say I'm also very pleased with the outcome of this, because I think there's a lot of learning from this type of meeting, and maybe a stimulus to do something more. So I think based on that, at least I think we can say that it's worthwhile considering a follow-up webinar or whatever we do in the near future to build on what we have talked about today, and maybe also capture the ideas of Albert to make contributions to some sort of action planning document.
Yeah, most welcome.
Thank you very much. And unless anybody else has something to say, I would definitely like.
There is someone, Jesper, raising the hand. Christian Keruf.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Please, Christian.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I just want to thank for a very inspiring seminar and very good presentations. So I just want to share my view on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And thanks to the excellent presenters today, Rosanne, Yvonne, Albert, Mogens, Jan, and Trond. Thank you very much for your support to making this a success. And it seems to be worthwhile that we pick up on this type of communication. So with that, I would like to finish, and unless you have more.
I've got one question.
Right.
My name's Andrew Lindsay. I'm from Dundee Airport in Scotland. I've got a couple of colleagues that are on the webinar as well. Thankfully, to one of my colleagues in Campbelltown, John, it was him that told us about this webinar, and that came from a colleague in Nature Scotland. So I wasn't aware of this through civil aviation links. So it would be useful for it to be made known through certainly the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK. Maybe Andy Baxter might know if that is the case already, but this is how I came to this meeting. It's a useful meeting, and I think it would be a lot of other airports in the UK certainly would be joining us if they'd known about it.
Andy, could I possibly come in there from the Scottish angle, if that's all right?
Yeah, right, on you go.
Yeah, I saw John's comment there. Unfortunately, I had to duck out the meeting to do another one for a wee while, but just reading John's comment and realising there's a few of you guys in here thinking it might be useful for us to have a Scottish get-together at some point in time. You know, we kind of deal locally with individual airports, but there's probably an across-the-board thing we could be looking at, you know, following on from this, if you're up for that.
Is that a question to me, Ray?
Yes, aye.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, I think there's definitely an interest in all the other airports, certainly in Scotland. We've all got the problem.
Yeah, okay.
And it's a big subject. And the other thing I wanted to say was, I came late into this webinar. I missed the Schiphol element. Is there a way that we can get to see that again, or is there a link to a website that we can look at it again? But apart from that, thanks very much. It's been really useful.
Yes, all the presentations will be uploaded. There was just a message from Chennai that there'll be a YouTube with the presentations and the discussions, and also the presentations, I guess, will be in the form of PDFs. Is that correct, Chennai?
Yes. Yes, I have just posted in the chat. The recording will be available on the YouTube channel, and the presentations on our website. The links are in the chat. But otherwise, please just contact us if you cannot find.
Yeah, and we'll make sure that we have a mailing list that is broader and more, comprehensive for the next call. Okay, so thank you very much, and thanks for an interesting afternoon.
Thank you, Jesper, for organizing this.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, also for hosting. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All the best. Take
Thank
care.
you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.